Welcome, dear viewers. For more exclusive and gripping tales every week, become part of our membership community. Sit back, unwind, and enjoy your coffee as you dive into the spookiest moments of the night shift. The most unsettling part of working alone at night is not the darkness surrounding me or the fact that I am dozens of miles away from any sign of human life out here in the Badlands. It is the hour just before feeding time when the entire place shifts atmosphere. The air becomes charged with energy, and certain enclosures stir in ways that make your teeth ache. You never get too close during this time, and though you inspect the boundaries thoroughly, there is a particular distance you quickly learn to maintain and specific routes you follow. Everyone here understands that instinctively. No one had to explain it to me twice after witnessing what happened to the last rookie. Only twisted metal remained by the fence, mangled beyond recognition. My name is Jack Miller, and before you ask, yes, I am Lakota, born in Pine Ridge and raised in Rapid City until my father lost his job at the cement factory. When I was 14, we moved to Wall, back when it was just a modest spot serving overpriced coffee to tourists heading toward Mount Rushmore. That was before Crenshaw Industries purchased half the vacant land and erected their research complex 3 miles south of town. Everyone suspected it wasn't genuine research, since real labs don't need 20-foot concrete walls crowned with inward-curving razor wire. They do not employ guards who sign confidentiality agreements denser than phone directories or demand background checks tracing back 3 generations. But the salary was unmatched, far higher than anything else within 100 miles. After my divorce left me drowning in debt with only a rundown pickup as my companion, I took the job. I could not afford to be selective since the entire application procedure lasted for half a year. It involved psychological assessments, physical health checks, and interviews with individuals whose business cards merely read consultant. They posed unusual questions such as how I managed pressure, whether I had encountered hallucinations, or if I believed in phenomena beyond scientific explanation. I was not truthful about the last one because growing up on the reservation teaches you there are realms science has yet to grasp. The training extended for another quarter of a year. They referred to it as the orientation phase, yet in reality it was a period of observation to see if anyone would break under pressure. The facility is located on 640 acres of cleared land dotted with prefabricated structures. It is encircled by nothing but prairie grasses and relentless winds. The main building resembles any ordinary industrial site, with loading bays, administrative offices, and a cafeteria permeated by the smell of disinfectants. However, the holding sections are considerably different. They consist of sturdy concrete tunnels that twist beneath the ground, linked by service corridors, broad enough for forklifts. The walls are so dense that sound does not travel. On our first day, they handed us a book of rules that was 15 pages long, single-spaced, laminated, and sequentially numbered. My supervisor, Pete Collins, gave me the packet. His hands trembled slightly, revealing he had been part of this place 8 years longer than any other staff member except the director. Pete showed kindness in his eyes, but startled at every phone ring. He said, "Read these tonight. Tomorrow we begin the hands-on part." The hands-on part? That was what awaited us next. They called it learning, which exhibits could penetrate reinforced steel, which ones reacted to electromagnetic fields, and why the emergency showers in Sector C constantly ran, even though nobody had activated them for months. But I am getting ahead of myself. Let me share the story of my first real shift, the night I discovered why the turnover rate was so high, the night I realized what creatures dwell in the tunnels beneath the Badlands. My first solo shift began at 10 o'clock in the evening on a Tuesday in October. The facility looked different after dark, somehow smaller, as if the shadows pressed against the perimeter lights, making everything seem more confined. Pete Collins had shown me the rotation 3 times during training, yet doing it alone felt like learning to drive again from scratch. The guard station stood in the center of the complex, a concrete box with bulletproof windows facing each sector. Inside, 4 monitors rotated through camera feeds, while a 5th displayed what they called the status board, a grid of green and red lights representing various areas. Green meant normal, and red meant keep away. There were other colors too, but Pete said those would come later. I poured coffee from the thermos my grandmother had packed. She grew worried when I told her about the job, constantly asking why security guards were necessary. For research on what she asked in Lakota, the tone in her voice was as if she thought I was making a mistake. I kissed her forehead and told her it was important. She told herself not to worry as she sat in that sterile room filled with the sharp scent of ozone. I regretted not asking more questions earlier. The rules booklet lay open next to my logbook. Rule 1 appeared straightforward. Inspect Sector A at 11 p.m., 1 a.m., 3 a.m., and 5 a.m. Use only the North Corridor and avoid entering the observation rooms. At 10:45, I grabbed my flashlight and radio and set off. The North Corridor was a straight path from the guard station, faintly illuminated by track lighting that emitted a soft hum just loud enough to notice. My footsteps echoed off the polished concrete walls, each sound returning slightly off, as if the walls were made from a material denser than they seemed. Sector A contained what the manifest referred to as Specimen Group Alpha. During training, we had only seen the corridor, a series of steel doors marked with numbers and biohazard signs. Tonight, I could hear sounds. It started as a faint scratching, similar to fingernails on metal, then shifted to something resembling breathing, if breathing could somehow create harmonies with itself. By the time I arrived at door 7, the noises had intensified into a sound that made my teeth ache. Then a voice spoke. "Hey there, new guy." I whirled around, my flashlight beam piercing through the empty corridor. No one was there but the voice itself, clear and conversational, as if someone was standing right beside me. "Down here, tough guy," the voice came again from door 7. I glanced at my rule sheet. Door 7 was highlighted in yellow with warnings. Do not respond to vocalizations. Do not make eye contact. Without any viewing windows, I had not noticed the small observation panel before a slim piece of reinforced glass positioned at eye level. Something shifted behind it, a shadow that seemed to warp the light around itself. "Come on, Jack. Just a quick glance," I thought. "I know you are curious about what Crenshaw has been gathering." My radio buzzed Pete Collins' voice, tense with concerned status report. "White Horse all clear in Sector A," I managed. "Remember our agreement. Keep your eyes forward. Mind your business." The noise coming from behind, door 7 chuckled. It reminded me of my ex-wife, the kind of laugh she had when she caught me lying. "Pete has feared me, been scared for 8 years. You should ask him about Detroit sometime. I once asked him about what happened to Rodriguez." Forcing myself to look away, I continued my patrol. The scratching noises followed me to the corridor's end, fading only as I reached the security checkpoint. Back in the guard station, I reviewed the monitors. Camera 7. Displayed an empty cell, just concrete walls, and a drain in the floor's center. Yet the audio feed captured something, a low rumble that caused the speakers to vibrate. The phone rang. White Horse. Pete Collins' voice sounded exhausted. "You all right out there?" "Yeah, just it spoke to me." A long pause. Which one door 7 knew my name? "They do that picking up information, somehow radio waves maybe, or mind-reading. The eggheads have their theories." Pete sighed. "The important thing is, you did not look. That's good. That is real." "Sure, what happened to Rodriguez?" The line was silent for so long, I thought Pete Collins had finally ended the call. Rodriguez was a rookie, curious kid from Phoenix who believed he could manage anything. Door 7 messed with his mind, made him hallucinate. He started talking to himself and scribbling messages on the walls, so they had no choice but to dismiss him. "Where is he now? He has been in a psychiatric hospital in Denver for 6 years. and still sketches the same vision repeatedly. Pete Collins' voice lowered. Listen, Jack Miller, some of these entities are cunning, way more intelligent than we are. They know how to get inside your head, but if you stick to the rules, you will be safe. The rules are reliable. They have protected people for nearly 10 years. I reviewed the rule booklet, 14 pages left to study. How many specimens remain? There are 43 active containments, 12 in temporary holding and 3 under critical observation. Pete paused. Your next shift is at 1:00 a.m. In Sector B. This one is special. Less talking, more hands-on. Keep your distance from all barriers. After Pete Collins ended the call, I stayed in the security room monitoring the screens. The status panel displayed all green lights except for one amber warning in Sector C. I checked Rule 12. If Sector C shows amber status, you must only monitor. Don't investigate. Contact the daytime supervisor if the amber signal lasts past 6 a.m. Somewhere inside the building, a howl echoed. The eerie sound rippled through the ventilation system, distorted and multiplied until it seemed to fill every corner, broadcast on the monitors. Nothing stirred. The cells appeared deserted, pure and secure. But I was discovering that appearances were deceiving in the Badlands. The true dangers were not the creatures visible to the eye. At 12:45 in the morning, I gathered my equipment for the Sector B patrol. The rule book here was more intricate, containing 3 pages filled with bullet points and cautions. Rule number 8 was crucial. Keep a minimum distance of 15 feet from all containment barriers. If any specimen approached while on patrol, immediately retreat to designated safe zones and wait for the creature to become dormant again. The map depicted Sector B as a vast open space with raised walkways overlooking multiple enclosures. Unlike Sector A's sterile corridors, this area resembled a warehouse fitted with stadium-style seating built into the walls. Observation platforms placed at various heights offered views into what appeared more like natural habitats than prison cells. I descended the eastern stairwell 2 levels down. The temperature rose, and the air carried a rich, earthy scent that reminded me of caves near Badlands National Park. My grandmother used to share stories about those caves, explaining how they extended far beyond known depths, linking to regions that existed long before white settlers arrived. The first enclosure housed a being that defied straightforward description. Picture a buffalo, but altered in every aspect. Too tall, with legs bent unnaturally as if unsupported. Its skin rippled like flowing water, shifting between multiple shades of brown and gray, blending into colors that were difficult to define. When it turned, there was something profoundly unsettling about its movement. As it moved toward me, I noticed eyes that caught the light much like those of nocturnal creatures, yet they were grouped in clusters across its skull. I glanced at my watch. It was 10:02 in the morning, right on time. The being had not come close to the barrier, so I proceeded to the following viewing post. Enclosure B2 seemed empty initially, just reddish soil and a few bones scattered around that likely belonged to deer. Suddenly, the earth beneath shifted. What I had mistaken for plain ground started to undulate, revealing itself as something alive and immense. The surface split into segments, each shifting independently but in a synchronized manner, resembling a collective life form that had mastered the art of camouflaging as the terrain. My radio crackled. "White Horse, do you copy?" Pete Collins' voice came through. "Go ahead, Pete." He reported Sector B was calm. B1 was alert but keeping its distance, while B2 remained active yet confined. Pete reminded me, if anything approaches the barrier, do not attempt to study its conduct. Just move to a secure area and call for backup. I acknowledged and continued the patrol. In enclosure B3, there was a figure that, from afar, appeared nearly human. Drawing closer, the similarity grew unsettling rather than reassuring. It stood upright on 2 legs, possessed 2 arms, and a head located roughly where one would expect. However, the proportions were off. The arms were excessively long, the torso unnaturally elongated, and the head rotated a few degrees further than typical neck movement permits. It sat curled up in the corner, gently swaying while softly humming a tune I almost recognized. It resembled a nursery rhyme melody, although the lyrics were in a tongue far older than any I had ever encountered. The sound seemed to creep beneath my skin, stirring an eerie sensation. A strange sensation settled into my skin like an itch I couldn't reach and scratch. That was when I spotted the photographs carefully hidden behind a pipe along the walkway. These Polaroid snapshots had been deliberately concealed from view. I looked around cautiously and saw no cameras aimed at this area, so I pulled them out. The first picture showed a man in a security officer's uniform standing right where I was now. He was smiling and giving a thumbs up to the camera. Behind him, enclosure B3 was empty. The date stamp marked it as 3 months earlier. The second photo featured the same man, in the same spot, but there was now some movement in the background of the enclosure. A shadow appeared, possibly the humanoid creature, or something else entirely. The third photo made my hands tremble. Same man, same place, but his smile seemed forced and his eyes had a glazed, distant look. Behind him, the humanoid pressed itself against the barrier, one of its long arms reaching toward the viewing area. The fourth photo showed the enclosure empty again, with no trace of the creature or the security guard. I quickly slipped the photos back behind the pipe and consulted my rule sheet. Rule 11 instructed me to report any unauthorized items found during patrol and to avoid removing or examining personal belongings left by earlier staff. Before I could radio in the discovery, a voice crackled in my earpiece. It wasn't Pete Collins who spoke. It came from behind me, near enclosure B3. I turned slowly, knowing deep down I shouldn't. Although I tried to resist, the humanoid figure stood by the barrier with its face pressed against the reinforced glass. Its features were a rough imitation of human form. Too many teeth, eyes blinking independently, and skin resembling molded clay, left out to harden in sunlight. Yet when it spoke, the voice was clear and male, sounding like someone in their mid-30s with an accent I couldn't recognize. "Those pictures you found, that's Jack Miller. He was employed here before you," it said. The creature's mouth did not move, as if the voice floated through the air itself. "A nice guy, Ojibwe, like your great-grandmother on your mother's side used to tell stories about his children in Minnesota." I took a step back, but it kept talking. Jack enjoyed taking photographs to document things management did not want known. One night, out of curiosity, he began questioning what happened to the previous guard and uncovered some revealing truths. The being, not quite human, tilted its head and asked if I wanted to learn what truly happened to Rodriguez. Suddenly, I recalled Rule 9, never to converse with specimens and to report any communication attempts directly to the day shift supervisor. I reached for my radio, but the creature laughed softly. Rodriguez did not investigate Door 7 out of curiosity. It was because they forced him to. The entities within Sector A were only the beginning. What you are seeing now, what is staring back, is only the main course. At that moment, the lights in Sector B dimmed ominously. Then the lights suddenly surged back to full brightness. In that brief moment of darkness, I could have sworn the creature shifted closer to the glass. I thought to ask Pete Collins about the actual turnover rate in the guards. Real figures, not those vague numbers listed in the employee manual. How many guards had vanished recently? No forwarding address, no final paycheck, no farewell. The creature's voice sank to a whisper, yet somehow traveled through the distance. Ask him why new guards are needed every 6 months. Forcing myself to look away, I headed toward the designated safe zone marked on my map, an armored alcove equipped with emergency lighting and a direct line to the guard station. Behind me, the creature began to sing once more, the same eerie nursery rhyme melody, its words resembling prayers spoken backward. The safe zone provided an unobstructed view of all three enclosures. B1's buffalo-like entity seemed to be resting, appearing asleep. B2's ground mimic stood motionless, blending perfectly with the barren soil it was imitating. But B3's humanoid figure remained near the barrier, watching the safe zone with eyes blinking independently. I called out to Pete Collins for a status update. Before I could even finish the sentence, he responded, "I need information about Tommy Bearcloud." There was a long pause. Then I asked, "Where did you hear that name?" Pete said he found some photos and B3 had been talking about him. I reminded Pete Collins firmly, "Jack Miller, I told you not to engage. Gather your patrol and return immediately to the guard station." He replied, "Now, Pete." "What happened at the guard station? We will discuss everything once you get back." I glanced one last time at enclosure B3. The creature known as B3 had moved away from the barrier and settled back into its corner, yet I could sense its focus like the warmth radiating from a fire. As I climbed the stairs back to the main floor, the humming returned. That tune followed me all the way to the guard post, embedding itself deep in my mind where it would linger long after. Though the sound faded, some songs once heard never truly vanish. They wait quietly in the corners of your thoughts, ready to begin again when least expected. In the Badlands, silence was abundant. Pete Collins was waiting when I arrived at the guard post. He had driven in from town in his battered Chevrolet, still wearing his pajama shirt beneath a thick jacket. His face looked as if it had aged a decade since our phone conversation. "Show me the photos," he demanded without any introduction. I led him down to Sector B via the eastern stairwell to the observation area. The Polaroids remained exactly where I had left them, tucked behind a pipe. Pete inspected each image with his flashlight, his expression growing darker with every picture. "Tommy was a decent guard," he commented at last. "Careful, followed the rules." Yet he had started to detect patterns. Guards who came before Tommy, whose personal belongings were found later in strange places, months after they were supposedly transferred elsewhere. "What kind of patterns?" I asked. Pete slipped the photos into his pocket. A coffee mug left in the break room belonging to a man who had departed 8 months earlier, work gloves discovered in the supply closet. Inside, small items bearing someone else's name management always provided explanations. He gestured toward enclosure B3 where the humanoid figure remained still in its corner. Tommy began recording everything meticulously, taking photographs and jotting down notes. Then one evening he failed to arrive for his shift and nobody bothered to investigate. The company sent a team which was extremely thorough and professional. They discovered his truck abandoned at a service station in Wyoming, the keys still left in the ignition. Surveillance footage captured him walking away from the vehicle, but the cameras lost sight of him after about 50 yards. Pete's voice softened as he said they concluded he suffered a breakdown due to job-related stress, loneliness, and too much time alone with his own thoughts, which often happens to guards at secluded sites. I glanced at enclosure B3 once more and noticed the creature had turned to face us. Although the distance made it difficult to discern any distinct features, you probably don't believe me. I believed it only for approximately a week until I stumbled upon his notebook hidden behind a heater in the break room. Tommy had been tracking something he referred to as the collection process. He recorded names, dates, and behavioral patterns from the weeks before the guards vanished. Pete rubbed his eyes thoughtfully. According to those notes, everything always begins the same way. The specimens initiate conversations with the new guard, sharing forbidden information, sparking their curiosity about subjects they should avoid. Like inquiries about Rodriguez, just as someone asked about Rodriguez. Pete started heading back toward the stairwell, saying, "Come on, I need to show you." Inside the administrative section, we took a path I had never encountered during training, passing through a network of maintenance tunnels that linked various parts of the complex. The walls here were made of aged concrete blocks rather than poured concrete, and ancient water stains formed abstract designs that appeared to move under the beam of Pete's flashlight. I asked him as we walked, "How long have you been working here?" He replied, 8 years next month. I started right after I got out of the army. Pete had been a military police officer deployed 3 times to locations that officially did not exist. He stopped before a heavy steel door labeled "Authorized Personnel Only." "I thought I had seen everything that was worth being scared of," he said, but I was mistaken. Using a key card, he opened the door, revealing a cramped office packed with filing cabinets and boxes. The desk was cluttered with personnel files, incident reports, and photographs similar to the ones Tommy had hidden. Pete explained, "This is Director Hawkins' private archive." He pulled out a thick folder, adding, "She does not know I have access to it, and I prefer it stays that way, but you need to realize what you have gotten yourself into." The folder contained employment records going back 12 years to the facility's opening. I counted that it listed 47 different security guards with detailed notes on their performance, psychological assessments, and reasons for termination. Most of these files ended with voluntary resignation. Issues related to stress or failure to show up for assigned duties were often assumed to be voluntary resignations, but psychological assessments painted a very different picture. Guards reported experiencing auditory and visual hallucinations, sleep disturbances, paranoia, and obsessive tendencies, especially regarding meticulous documentation of facility activities. When I examined the dates, Pete explained, he noticed an unmistakable trend. I reviewed the termination dates and immediately recognized the pattern. Most guards endured between 4 and 8 months. A handful lasted up to a year, but only Pete had managed to surpass 18 months. The survival rate was around 15%. Pete added, "The company is aware of this and incorporates it into their hiring plans. There is an entire division dedicated to covering up disappearances by fabricating records for guards who supposedly moved to different roles." One file particularly caught my eye. Maria Santos, dismissed after 6 months. Her photograph depicted a woman in her 30s with gentle eyes and a self-assured grin. Her last psychological report noted an excessive fascination with specimen behavior and the history of the facility. A handwritten comment in the margin warned, "Recommend immediate dismissal before contamination spreads to other personnel." They refer to contamination as what happens when a guard starts asking the right questions once the specimens successfully communicate. Pete then produced another file marked with a red stamp stating, "Critical incident." "This is Rodriguez's file. Want to find out the truth behind what happened?" I nodded, even though part of me hesitated. Jack Miller wanted to leave this office, this building, this whole nightmare behind. Rodriguez was not only interested in Door 7 because he was tracking the previous guard's records. A man named William Crow Feather, a Lakota like his name implied, had discovered that the specimens were somehow linked, sharing information through means the research group could not comprehend. Pete Collins opened Rodriguez's file and exposed numerous handwritten pages, all in Spanish, accompanied by English translations attached to each sheet. These notes recorded dialogues with several specimens, thorough observations of their behavior, and an emerging idea that the creatures were not independent beings at all. Instead, they were components of a greater whole, a collective intelligence that exploited human curiosity for its own objectives. Rodriguez spent 3 weeks recording every detail and then made a critical error. Pete showed me the last entry dated 1 day before Rodriguez's mental collapse. He attempted to directly communicate with the entity behind Door 7, not only by hearing its voice, but also by looking straight at it as it spoke. The description that followed unsettled me deeply. Rodriguez had witnessed something behind Door 7 that his mind could not fully process. a form constantly shifting between the familiar and the alien, human and non-human. Yet, even more disturbing than the visual was the knowledge it revealed, the understanding of what the facility truly was, what the specimens were creating, and the security guards were part of a much larger scheme embedded in their long-term strategies. What appeared in Door 7 unveiled the reality to him. Pete declared, "Everything makes sense now. What happens to those guards who vanish, where they end up, and why the specimens require fresh human interaction every few months." After closing the file, Rodriguez kept drawing the same image repeatedly because his mind could only hold on to that. All other memories were wiped away. I leaned back in the worn office chair, struggling to absorb the truth I had just uncovered. I asked, "So why are you revealing this to me? Why not just let me quit?" Pete responded, "You are different, Lakota, like Crow Feather. The specimens react differently to people with indigenous heritage. They reveal more information and establish connections more swiftly." His face was serious as he explained that the corporation deliberately hires from reservations and indigenous communities, believing there is some link to spiritual awareness or genetic memory. But the truth is, no one truly understands why this happens. A thought struck me. If you know all of this, then why haven't you left? Pete was silent for a long time, his voice barely a whisper when he finally spoke. "I can't. None of us can. After a while here, the specimens invade your mind, making themselves essential. You start believing that someone must remain vigilant, enforcing the rules and keeping the barriers intact." He locked eyes with me, saying, 3 years ago, I tried to walk away. Made it to Rapid City before turning back. I convince myself it is because someone has to protect others from what is kept in here, but deep inside, I know. The truth is that I am not protecting them from us, but rather protecting us from them, and eventually this difference becomes irrelevant. We sat quietly for several minutes, surrounded by the proof of about 36 security failures. Outside, the wind had picked up, causing the windows of the administrative building to rattle. Somewhere in the facility, the alarm sounded twice, the signal for the 3:00 a.m. rounds. "I have to return," I said. Pete acknowledged with a nod. "Sector A once more. Door number 7 will be expecting you. It knows you have discovered something tonight, and it will want answers." He handed me a small gadget resembling a hearing aid. "This audio filter will not block everything, but it will help to reduce the frequency tricks they use. Keep it in your left ear." As I got ready to leave the office, Pete called out once more, "Jack, whatever door number 7 wants to reveal, whatever it promises to explain, do not look. The only reason I'm still functioning is that I never made direct eye contact with any of them. Once you understand what they truly are, returning to how you were is impossible." I walked back through the maintenance tunnels toward Sector A, Pete's warnings echoing in my thoughts. But I was already beginning to realize that warnings alone would not suffice. The subjects had waited patiently for decades, observing guards, studying human responses, anticipating something. The audio filter felt odd in my ear, like water trapped after swimming, but it lessened the background noise of the facility softened into a distant murmur, yet I could still hear the echoes of my footsteps bouncing off the hallway walls. As I neared Sector A for my 3:00 morning inspection, Door 7 awaited me. Even before I arrived at the observation area, I felt its presence. The air felt denser, energized much like the atmosphere before a prairie thunderstorm. My grandmother used to say she could taste the electricity hours before a storm hit, and now I finally understood her meaning. "Jack," the voice came through the dampener, distorted yet unmistakable. "You've been occupied tonight, learning things, asking questions." I kept walking, concentrating on the checklist in my hand. Inspect every door for structural soundness, confirm containment seals, monitor the ambient temperature. Simple duties, unrelated to whatever was behind Door 7. Pete gave you the files, didn't he? All those names, all those dates, 47 guards in 12 years, the voice said with a hint of humor, but it omitted the most compelling detail: what happens to them after we gather them. Despite Pete's cautions, despite the dampener, despite every instinct shouting at me to move along, I paused. Not at door 7, but door 5, 3 cells away. Close enough to hear clearly, yet distant enough to seem natural. They do not die, Jack. Death would be pointless. We need them awake, conscious, able to absorb information. They transform into part of the network, additional nodes within a system stretching across continents. I forced myself to carry on. The patrol was inspecting doors 1 through 6, and although each cell seemed empty at first glance, the audio monitors picked up various noises. There were sounds of scratching, breathing, and what might have been whispered conversations in languages I could not identify. At door 7, I spoke into my radio following the usual procedure and said, "Visual inspection complete." "Copy that," Pete Collins' voice responded with a crackle. Looking for any irregularities, my eyes rested on the narrow viewing window where something shifted behind the reinforced glass. A shadow that appeared to warp the light around itself caught my attention. It was the same shadow I'd noticed during my initial patrol, but now I realized it was observing me just as closely as I was trying not to observe it. "Negative. Continuing patrol," I reported, but did not move as the presence behind door 7 had gone silent, and somehow that silence was more unsettling than any noise. The absence of sound meant it was thinking, scheming, and waiting for the perfect moment to reveal whatever insight it believed would break me. "You want to know about William Crow Feather?" the voice finally said. Pete had mentioned him, but never revealed the full story. Crow Feather had uncovered our true mission here and understood the real intentions behind Crenshaw Industries' operations. I resumed walking, but the voice kept pace with me down the hallway. "This place is not a research lab or a containment facility. It is a recruitment office," it explained. "We are not prisoners, Jack Miller. We are employees, and every few months new personnel are brought on board." When I reached the end of the corridor, I turned around and started back. The return walk always felt longer, as though the walls themselves stretched to keep me inside. The corridor seemed to stretch endlessly without my noticing, and my footsteps echoed at uneven intervals, creating a rhythm that did not align with my stride. Crow Feather endured nearly 1 year longer than most because he grasped what we were offering: partnership instead of fear, collaboration rather than opposition. The voice hesitated as I passed door number 7 once more. "He is still here, you realize. Not inside these cells, but deep down, in areas Pete Collins is not authorized to enter." I reached the security checkpoint and swiped my badge. The scanner beeped twice, once signaling entry and once signaling exit. Based on my training, it should beep only once at the conclusion of the patrol. I made a note in my logbook to ask Pete about this inconsistency. "Check your pocket, Jack," the voice insisted. I stopped in my tracks. My jacket had been hanging at the guard station throughout the night. No one else had access to these secured areas. Yet when I reached into my left pocket, my fingers found an object that had not been there before, a tiny item wrapped in tissue paper. Inside the tissue was a carved wooden figurine approximately 3 inches tall, crafted in Lakota style. It portrayed a warrior wearing a wolf headdress with astonishing detail, each feather sculpted individually, every tooth in the wolf's mouth distinct. This was the kind of craftsmanship that demanded weeks of dedication. I recognized the artistic style instantly because my great-uncle had made similar pieces, selling them to tourists in Rapid City before arthritis robbed his hands of their skill. He had been gone for 5 years now. Turning the figure over in my hand, the voice whispered again. At the base of the figure, tiny letters carved in suggested the initials WCF, William Crow Feather. It was crafted during his 8th month there, made in his spare time while working in the woodshop on pieces for his daughter's birthday. She would have celebrated her 7th birthday in October. The voice carried authentic sorrow, yet by October, Crow Feather had uncovered too much to leave, so he remained and became one with the team. I shoved the figure back inside my pocket and moved on toward the guard station. But the corridor suddenly seemed longer, stretching out ahead of me like a never-ending tunnel. My radio crackled with static, and then Pete Collins' voice came through, distorted. He requested a status update, and I answered, "White Horse Patrol complete." Returning to station, "Copy, Annie." His voice responded before the transmission cut out and was replaced by white noise. I tried to call back, but there was no reply. Although the radio displayed full signal strength, every channel produced the same static. The guard station lights ahead flickered once and then stabilized. "Communications are unreliable at this hour," the voice explained. "I am now 50 yards from Sector A. Electromagnetic interference from the deep levels disrupts signal. The equipment down there generates a great deal of ambient energy." Reaching the guard station, I checked the monitors. All sectors showed green status with no alerts or abnormalities except camera 7A. This camera should have displayed an empty cell but revealed something else entirely. A figure sat in the corner where shadow met light. Human in shape, but clearly wrong. In size, it seemed to be engraving something using a small knife. I switched to camera 7B, which captured the same cell from another perspective. Empty concrete, nothing else. Returning to 7A, the figure remained, now holding up its carving for the camera to observe. Another wooden warrior, exactly like the one in my pocket. Suddenly, the phone rang. White Horse, but not Pete Collins' voice. It sounded as if someone who might have once been human had forgotten how to use vocal cords correctly. "Jack Miller, this is William Crow Feather. I need you to listen closely." I hung up right away, but the phone rang again. "Do not hang up. This is vital. Pete is hiding things from you. The people controlling this facility are not human and have not been for many years. The real employees vanished long ago and were replaced by something that learned to imitate human actions." I pulled the phone cord from the wall, but Crow Feather's voice carried on through the radio speakers. "The beings inside the cells are not monsters, but refugees fleeing from what took over the surface levels. What has been wearing Pete's face? What responds when you call for backup?" Suddenly, the lights in the guard station went off, and emergency lighting came on, casting a red glow. The monitors displayed unfamiliar views of the facility, hallways filled with figures moving with a dangerous grace, rooms where humanoid forms sat at desks typing reports and filing papers with robotic efficiency. Precision Level B7, Crow Feather's voice echoed from the elevator behind the maintenance office. The access code was 1847, the year of the Treaty of Fort Laramie. "Come alone. Trust no one, especially Pete, and be wary of anyone claiming they want to help you." The warning was clear. The regular lights flickered back on. Monitors returned to their usual displays. Empty hallways, silent cells, status boards all glowing green. Then my radio crackled. Pete's voice breaking through. "Jack Miller, do you copy?" "Lost you there for a moment." "I'm here," I managed. I replied. "How's everything looking?" I glanced at the monitors showing the facility's peaceful state, but still felt the wooden figure pressing in my pocket. Undeniable proof that something extraordinary had occurred. All was calm, I lied to myself. "Excellent. Next round's at 5 a.m. Get some rest." I leaned back in the guard station chair, surrounded by screens that might or might not be showing me the truth. Outside, the wind swept over the Badlands, carrying mysterious sounds. The wooden warrior in my palm grew warm as I turned it over between my fingers. The hour between 4 and 5 a.m. stretched endlessly, each minute dragging slowly like taffy. At the guard station, I held Crow Feather's wooden carving, trying to decipher the events. The figure was solid, carved from what appeared to be Black Hills spruce, the initials on its base smoothed over, as if someone had rubbed them countless times. At exactly 4:30, I made a firm choice. The maintenance office was situated one level below the guard post and could be reached via a service stairwell I had noticed during training but never ventured into. According to the facility blueprints, the room contained electrical panels, water heaters, and storage for cleaning materials. Still, maps could be misleading, especially in a place where nothing was truly as it appeared. I left the guard post 15 minutes ahead of schedule, convincing myself that I was performing an additional security check. The service stairwell was much narrower than the main hallways, with concrete walls stained by water damage and showing years of neglect. My footsteps echoed strangely, producing sharp sounds that seemed to return from faraway distances. The maintenance office door bore the usual signs: authorized personnel only, electrical hazard warnings. But when I grabbed the handle, it opened effortlessly. Inside, everything looked typical: gray metal shelves stocked with supplies, a water heater quietly humming in one corner, and electrical panels covered with caution labels in several languages. Yet behind the water heater, partially concealed in shadows, I discovered what Crow Feather had mentioned: a concealed elevator door. The button panel appeared old-fashioned, reminiscent of those from the 1960s office buildings. Instead of floor numbers, the buttons featured letters: G, B1, B2, B3, and at the very bottom, B7. A small keypad was fixed next to these buttons, its LED screen displaying 4 dashes, ready for an input. I entered the code. In 1847, the display glowed green and the elevator doors slid open with a gentle chime. The journey down to basement 7 took more time than I anticipated. By my count, we had descended at least 20 floors, much deeper than the facility's blueprints had indicated. When the doors finally parted, I stepped into a hallway that belonged to another time period. The walls were adorned with dark wood paneling, reminiscent of a classic hotel interior. Edison bulbs, along with brass fixtures, cast a warm and steady light. The polished hardwood floor creaked softly beneath my boots. Everything on this level spoke of careful craftsmanship and meticulous attention to detail, which was a sharp contrast to the bare concrete we had seen upstairs. A sign above read, "Welcome to the real facility." I turned and saw Jack Miller standing about 20 feet away. He appeared younger than I had imagined, perhaps around 40, with streaks of silver in his hair and eyes that reflected many years of hard-earned knowledge. His attire of jeans and a flannel shirt seemed ordinary, yet somehow out of place in this underground sanctuary. I told him, "You are not a prisoner," more as a statement than a question. He responded, "None of us are. We are volunteers." Then he motioned for me to follow him down the corridor, explaining, "The things you see upstairs in the cells are mere decoys, shadows and illusions created to uphold the deception that all the real work takes place above." We moved past several doors, each bearing symbols unfamiliar to me. They were geometric shapes that appeared to shift subtly if I did not look directly at them. Through some of the doorways, I caught fleeting glimpses of what lay beyond. In workshops filled with people focused on detailed projects, their hands moved with practiced accuracy. What kind of preparation is this for the surface world that is changing? Jack Miller has been aware for decades that something is approaching that will transform everything humanity believes about reality. We are constructing lifeboats. Crow Feather guided me to a circular chamber topped with a domed ceiling painted to resemble the night sky. The stars shifted slowly, forming new constellations as we observed. Comfortable chairs were placed around the perimeter in small clusters, and I noticed familiar individuals from personnel files: Maria Santos Rodriguez and even Tommy Bear Cloud, each alive and seemingly unaffected by their past experiences. Crow Feather explained that the surface facility serves as a recruitment hub. As we settled into two chairs facing each other, he said Crenshaw Industries identifies people with unique abilities, often indigenous individuals who possess genetic markers indicating sensitivity to dimensional changes. They bring these candidates here, expose them to controlled supernatural phenomena, and assess their psychological makeup. Then the candidates vanish. Some individuals cannot accept the reality of what is coming. Their minds reject the truth, so they are given new identities and move to secure communities. Others, like you, adjust and are invited to participate in the actual mission. Rodriguez came over, holding a tray with coffee and what appeared to be fresh. Jack Miller moved with assurance, showing no signs of the mental harm Pete Collins had described. When he smiled, his eyes were sharp and focused. The collapse was orchestrated, Pete noted, seeming to read my mind to keep up the pretense. My family believes I'm in a psychiatric hospital, but I call them every week, he explained. They are safe, protected, and will be among the first to evacuate when the time arrives. I accepted the coffee mainly to keep my hands occupied. Evacuated from what? The convergence, Maria Santos explained. Occurring every several thousand years, the barriers between dimensions weaken and entities from parallel realities begin to seep through. It started gradually with mysterious events, cryptic sightings, and supernatural encounters dismissed by conventional science. But now it is quickening. She pulled out a tablet displaying satellite images from around the globe. Each was dotted in red around particular geographic features such as mountain ranges, dense forests, and ancient burial sites. These are emergent zones where the dimensional veil grows thin. The government has been aware of these for decades, yet treats the issue as purely a military matter. They believe they can control or harness whatever comes through, but they are drastically wrong. What is appearing is neither hostile nor alien. It is ice, Jack explained. Human consciousness is expanding beyond the confines of three-dimensional reality, knowledge our ancestors once possessed. Civilizations constructed monuments and rituals to ready themselves for cycles, yet modern society has lost touch with this ancient wisdom. Crowfeather leaned in his seat and said, "Your grandmother's tales about the caves beneath the Badlands are not just myths, but actual maps and instructions meant for times when the boundaries fade away. The spirits, she mentions, those guarding the land, act as scouts, warning of what is to come. When I accepted this role, I reflected on my grandmother's cautions and her firm belief that some sites are meant to remain untouched. She understands that ancestral knowledge is deeply rooted in certain lineages, which is why individuals like you are essential. The convergence will bring upheaval to most of humanity, but indigenous peoples have preserved enough of the ancient ways to act as guides and teachers." Tommy Bearcloud settled opposite me, appearing exactly as captured in the concealed images. The facility on the surface serves several tasks. It identifies candidates who match specific genetic and mental criteria. It evaluates their responses to supervised supernatural experiences, and it conceals our true mission below ground, where we prepare the infrastructure for what lies ahead. When the barriers finally collapse entirely, reality will become unstable. Thoughts will take shape as tangible forms. Feelings will transform the environment, and human awareness will broaden to experience multiple dimensions concurrently. Tommy spoke with enthusiasm, rather than dread, because most people are not ready. For a transformation of that magnitude, they will require guides, teachers, and safe environments to adjust. Rodriguez handed me a folder brimming with detailed drawings and blueprints. We are creating transition centers at 12 locations throughout North America, subterranean complexes intended to safeguard and educate individuals during the convergence period. The Badlands site serves as the model. I examined the plans, recognizing the tunnels and chambers I had witnessed tonight, but these drawings revealed expansions I had yet to explore. Immense halls capable of accommodating thousands, classrooms designated for teaching dimensional control, and meditation rooms meant to encourage the growth of awareness. How much time do we have? 3 years. Possibly 4, Maria replied. The signs are intensifying, the emergence points are becoming increasingly active. Normal people are beginning to experience events they can neither ignore nor rationalize, and traditional explanations no longer suffice. A soft tone resonated in the round chamber, and Crowfeather glanced at his watch. It is time for your 5 a.m. patrol. Pete will be waiting for you. Pete? I almost forgot about the surface world. Is he human? Yes, but impaired. Crenshaw exerts psychological influence over him, keeping him operational through a mix of medication and conditioning. Pete believes he is shielding people from the creatures, but in reality, he is preserving the cover story. Crowfeather rose to his feet. He is not malicious, just constrained by his circumstances. This is the surface operation. Operating within ordinary reality is essential for people in this mission. As we headed back to the elevator, I caught glimpses of more underground facility labs where experts combined cutting-edge technology with traditional native crafts. Walls lined with books in unfamiliar languages surrounded us. Gardens flourished under artificial suns, with leaves glowing in colors beyond the visible range. I asked, "What happens next?" Once we reached the elevator. You finish your shift, keep up the patrols, obey the rules, and maintain the illusion. But when you are prepared to dive deeper, the elevator will be here for you. Eventually, when the moment arrives, you will assist us in getting your community ready for what lies ahead, Rodriguez explained. He handed me a small device resembling a pager, an emergency communicator to be used if something goes wrong above ground. If Pete or the others begin acting oddly, use this. We are constantly monitoring surface activities. The trip back up to basement one felt quicker than descending. Stepping into the maintenance room revealed everything unchanged. The water heater softly buzzed, and electrical panels displayed normal levels. Yet, I carried the burden of new truths, and the wooden carving in my pocket felt like a charm linking me to a secret world beneath the one I thought I knew. At 5:02 in the morning, I radioed Pete to start the final patrol. Copy that, Whitehorse. How are you holding up first? Nighttime could be harsh as I glanced down the familiar hallways with the security cameras. The containment doors now seemed to shelter nothing but shadows and echoes. The true threats were not hidden here. Instead, they were the individuals who had persuaded humanity that consciousness was confined, that reality was unchangeable, and that people were isolated in the cosmos doing just fine. I told Pete I was learning a great deal, and for the very first time since arriving at the facility, I truly believed it. The last patrol felt like strolling through a movie set. Every door, every camera, every supposedly secure containment chamber appeared as nothing more than an intricate stage. I went through the routine checking locks, monitoring temperatures, jotting down observations while my mind absorbed what I had uncovered deep within Sector A. I stopped briefly at door number 7. The entity inside had become quiet, no longer attempting to communicate with me. Through the narrow observation window, I saw only darkness. Yet I sensed an intense focus directed at me like the warmth of a blazing furnace. "You understand now," whispered a voice barely audible despite the audio dampener. "Truth changes everything, does it not?" I stayed silent, but the voice pressed on. "Pete will notice the difference in you. He has been trained to spot such signs. To keep the surface operation running smoothly, certain psychological conditions must be met, and you are no longer functioning within the required limits." This gave me reason to hesitate. If Pete could perceive shifts in my behavior, how would that affect what was coming next? Long before whoever truly controlled the facility made their decision, I was already considered a risk. After completing the inspection of Sector A, I proceeded to Sector B. The buffalo-like creature in Enclosure B, one stood still in the middle of its space, yet its eyes followed my every move with an unsettling sharpness. The ground mimic in B2 had positioned itself into shapes that might have been letters or signs, though from my viewpoint, their meaning was unclear. However, it was enclosure B3 that forced me to stop abruptly. The humanoid entity that had occupied that space for months, according to the records, was now missing. The habitat stood empty except for some scattered bones that definitely were not there during my earlier check. I glanced at my watch. It was 5:23 in the morning. I'd only been underground for less than an hour, but the timeline already felt off. I keyed my radio and said, "This is Whitehorse. I have a situation in Sector B." There was static, then Pete's voice came through, tense but clear. "Go ahead, Jack. B3 looks empty. The specimen is nowhere to be seen." After a long pause, he asked, "Are you sure?" "Check the corners, all the blind spots." I performed another thorough visual scan, though I already suspected what I would find. Confirmed empty. No trace of the specimen. "Jack, you need to return to the guard station immediately. Do not investigate further or enter any other enclosures." As I walked back through the facility, I noticed other alterations. Emergency lights that I was certain had not been installed before, and new security cameras placed in previously unmonitored corners. The walls themselves appeared altered, coated with fresher paint, emitting a different hue beneath the fluorescent lights. The security station seemed off as well. Everything was positioned correctly, yet the overall setup felt slightly unnatural, almost as if someone had reconstructed the space using photographs instead of relying on memory. When I arrived, Pete Collins was waiting, but his stance made me instinctively reach for the emergency communicator Rodriguez had given me. "Rough night," Pete said without meeting my gaze. "First shifts are always tough. There's a lot to absorb. Lots to learn. The specimen in B3 was relocated during your break. An administrative choice. It happens occasionally with the more unstable subjects." Pete's voice was monotone, as if reciting from a prepared script. "You were probably in the bathroom when the transfer team passed by." I had not been in the bathroom. I'd been 4 levels beneath the surface, speaking with people presumed either dead or insane, but something in Pete's behavior warned me against disputing his explanation. "Makes sense," I replied instead. "Shall I file a report?" "It has already been handled. Corporate likes to manage specimen transfers internally." Pete turned toward me, and for a brief moment, his eyes caught the light like those of an animal. "How are you feeling, Jack? Any abnormal stress, confusion, or hearing things?" His question was too precise, too loaded. I forced myself to seem calm, mostly weary after a long night with much to process. New information often feels normal, yet isolation can distort your perception. The key is to keep precise records and follow the set procedures closely. Pete Collins handed me a clipboard holding what seemed like a psychological survey form, a typical post-shift evaluation. As I reviewed the questions, had I experienced any strange sounds during my shift? Had I noticed unusual conduct from the contained specimens? Had I encountered unauthorized individuals or seen access to restricted zones? Each question seemed like a subtle test. I completed the form with calm and measured answers, aware Pete was observing my every move. When I finished, he glanced at my responses and nodded with approval. "Excellent work tonight, Jack. You are adjusting well to the environment," he said. "The day shift supervisor will inform you about any updates to procedures." Just as Pete was about to leave, I asked about William Crow Feather. Pete hesitated with his hand on the doorknob for several moments, neither moving nor speaking. When he finally faced me again, his expression was unreadable. "I do not recognize that name." "Are you talking about a previous employee?" he asked. "The man who worked here before." "Rodriguez. Lakota. A skilled carver." "You mentioned him earlier," I replied. "I do not remember mentioning anyone like that." "Perhaps you are mixing up names," Pete said with a scripted tone. Memory can be unreliable during night shifts because of tiredness, sensory deprivation, and solitude. Feeling the pressure, I nodded silently but stored away his reaction. Pete Collins, who had introduced me to the personnel files, would have immediately understood whom I was referring to. This version appeared to be drawing from a completely different set of memories. After Pete left, I remained alone in the guard station, surrounded by technology that might or might not be showing me the truth. The emergency communicator weighed heavily in my pocket, yet I hesitated to activate it. If the surface facility was being monitored, which was almost certain, any attempt to contact the underground operation could compromise both networks. Instead, I reached for my logbook and started drafting my official shift report. Hidden between the formal observations and standard procedures, I recorded everything I had genuinely witnessed. I outlined my conversations at Door 7, the revelation of Tommy's photographs, Pete's strange behavior, and the alterations made to Sector B at 6 o'clock in the morning. The day shift supervisor arrived soon after. Dr. Sarah Hawkins was a petite woman in her 50s with graying hair and wire-rimmed glasses. She had the look of someone's kindly aunt, the kind who bakes cookies for church fundraisers and volunteers at animal shelters. Yet, when she shook my hand, her grip was firm enough to make knuckles crack. "Jack Miller, how was your first night?" she asked. "Educational," I replied, handing over my finished logbook. She flipped through the pages, pausing at a few entries. "You are thorough. I respect your attention to detail," she said, her eyes locking with mine over the top of her glasses. "Any inquiries regarding procedures, protocols, or safety precautions?" Just one question came up. "What is the typical turnover rate for security staff?" "Doctor," Hawkins smiled, yet her eyes showed no warmth. "It is lower than you might assume. We have noticed that individuals who adjust well to our environment usually remain for the long haul. It almost turns into a vocation, a rare kind of calling that is difficult to find anywhere else. Meanwhile, those who struggle to adapt receive generous severance packages and strong endorsements for roles more aligned with their nature. We look after our team. Jack, even when they decide this line of work is not for them." She escorted me to the exit, engaging in light conversation about the weather and traffic conditions, but I sensed her analyzing every word, motion, and subtle facial cue. The psychological evaluation had not ceased with Pete Collins leaving. It was continuous, likely documented, definitely scrutinized. The early October morning was sharp and lucid. The sunrise colored the Badlands in hues of gold and crimson, reminiscent of my grandmother's quilts. For a brief moment, I nearly forgot the facility behind me. The underground vaults, the burden of knowledge pressing on my chest like swallowed pebbles. However, as I drove back to Wall, I kept glancing into my rearview mirror. Not out of fear of being followed, I was fairly confident they expected my return, but to detect if the surface world was as fleeting as the containment chambers. Below, my grandmother was awake when I arrived and sat on the porch with a cup of coffee and a cigarette. She examined my face as I climbed the stairs, noticing signs I was unaware I displayed. "Tough night?" she asked in Makakota. "Unusual night," I answered in the same language. She nodded as if that confirmed what she had suspected. "Your great-grandfather used to tell stories about the deep places," she explained. "He said there were people down there who remembered the old agreements, the treaties made before the whites arrived, treaties with beings that were not entirely human." I sat down beside her, feeling drained but too restless to sleep. "What kind of agreements?" I asked. She replied, "Balance, reciprocity, mutual aid during times of change." She exhaled smoke into the morning air. He said those people still honored the bargains even after everyone else forgot what they were dealing with. My emergency communicator buzzed once against my leg and then went quiet, reminding me that I was now linked to two worlds. The one above, where people like Pete Collins maintained comfortable illusions, and the one below, where future refugees prepared for transformations destined to reshape everything. I gazed across the Badlands at the ancient terrain that had witnessed countless shifts over millions of years. Beneath that scarred earth, William Crow Feather and the others were creating something that might preserve human consciousness through what comes next. The transformation was underway, and somewhere above, Dr. Hawkins was likely analyzing my psychological profile, deciding if I was prepared for the next stage of recruitment. The sun rose higher, warming the porch and making my eyelids grow heavy. Before going inside to rest, I took out the wooden carving and showed it to my grandmother. She carefully inspected it, tracing her fingers over the intricate details. When she returned it, her face was serious. "This is fine craftsmanship, traditional style, but created with modern understanding," she said, looking straight at me. "Be cautious, grandson. Some paths, once taken, cannot be undone." I slipped the carving into my pocket and entered the house, aware she was right, but also knowing that turning back had never truly been an option, for me, nor for anyone who had glimpsed what lay beneath the world's surface. The convergence was approaching, whether we were ready or not. The real question was if humanity would face it with wisdom or with fear. I rested for 4 hours and awoke to the sound of helicopters outside my bedroom window. 3 black helicopters circled the facility in the distance, moving with military precision and maintaining perfect formation as they patrolled the perimeter. In the kitchen, my grandmother watched through her binoculars, which she usually used for bird watching. "They started about an hour ago," she informed me when I joined her. "These are big ones, not the usual." The emergency communicator on my nightstand began buzzing insistently. I grabbed it and saw a text message stating the surface operation had been breached and to maintain the usual routine without returning prematurely. My shift was not due to start for another 6 hours, but something had obviously gone awry at the facility. I brewed some coffee, attempting to absorb the gravity of the situation. The helicopter hinted at federal involvement, perhaps the FBI or military intelligence. Someone with considerable power had determined the facility required immediate intervention. My grandmother handed me the binoculars and told me to check the parking area. Peering through the lenses, I spotted a convoy of white vans stationed near the administrative building. Men in suits moved briskly between the vehicles and the entrance, carrying equipment cases and boxes of documents. From this distance, they resembled insects swarming a disturbed hive. I murmured, "They're cleaning house." The question was whether they were erasing evidence or silencing witnesses. That thought sent chills down my spine. Pete Collins, Dr. Hawkins, and the day shift guards, they were likely caught in the crossfire. If the federal agents uncovered the underground levels, Crow Feather's entire operation would be jeopardized. My phone rang with an unknown number, yet the familiar voice on the line made me pause. "Jack, this is Dr. Hawkins. I need you to come in early for an emergency briefing. There have been developments overnight requiring heightened security," he said. I preferred to discuss the protocols and the types of developments in person. "Could you arrive by 2 in the afternoon?" I checked the clock. It was 1:15. "I will be there." "Great. Use the north entrance and ask for Dr. Martinez. He will guide you to the briefing room." After the call ended, I stared at the phone. Dr. Hawkins had sounded calm and professional, utterly normal. However, the federal involvement indicated anything but normal. Usually, she was either unaware of the investigation or playing a very risky game. I put on my security uniform and made my way to the truck. While driving to the facility, the emergency communicator buzzed again. "Dr. Martinez is not facility staff. Abort, if possible." It was too late. I was already committed to the meeting, and turning back now would only confirm the suspicions that sparked the investigation. The best choice was to act like an uninformed night guard, caught up in events he did not understand. The north entrance was watched by 2 men in dark suits who checked my ID with practiced precision. One spoke into a throat microphone before signaling me to enter. Inside, the facility felt different, smaller and more confined, like the walls were closing in. Without me noticing, Dr. Martinez awaited in the lobby. He was Hispanic, in his early 40s, with a physique suggesting military experience. His handshake was firm but brief, and his eyes never stopped moving, constantly surveying the surroundings for any sign of trouble. "Threats or opportunities, Jack Miller, thank you for arriving early. I understand this interrupts your usual routine." "No problem." Dr. Hawkins mentioned there were new security measures. Among other updates, Martinez guided me through hallways I'd never seen before, past offices crowded with employees packing files into boxes. "We are conducting an extensive evaluation of facility procedures, part of which includes interviewing all staff about their experiences and observations." The briefing room was cramped and windowless, containing a metal table and 3 chairs. Martinez motioned for me to sit, while he stayed standing, a typical interrogation stance aimed at asserting psychological dominance. "Let's begin with last night, your first solo shift. How did it go?" I gave him the same polished report I'd given Pete and Dr. Hawkins' routine rounds. Equipment inspections, no anomalies. Martinez listened quietly, sometimes jotting notes on a tablet. "Did you notice any unusual behavior from the contained specimens?" "They made sounds, scratching movements, and what seemed like vocalizations." Pete said that was normal. "Did any specimens try to communicate with you directly?" The question was pointed enough to imply they knew something had occurred. I weighed my options and chose a partial truth. "Something in Sector A spoke to me, knew my name, made remarks about the facility. I reported it to Pete." "What did Pete say about these communications from the specimens?" "Sometimes information is gathered through mysterious channels such as radio waves or mental communication. He advised against interacting with them." Martinez took further notes and asked if I followed that guidance. I attempted to do so, but the presence in Door 7 was relentless and continued speaking even when I ignored it. I asked what it revealed to me. This was a pivotal moment, as I wondered how much knowledge they had and what I could safely disclose without compromising the covert operation. I chose to provide them with details that could be verified by surveillance recordings. The entity mentioned past guards and referred to someone named Rodriguez, who supposedly saw something forbidden. It also brought up a person called Crow Feather. Martinez's face remained unchanged, but he paused his note-taking. I inquired about what was said regarding William Crow Feather. The message implied that Crow Feather had uncovered something about the facility and was still present somewhere within. I met Martinez's gaze and questioned Pete about this later, but he claimed ignorance of that name. I wondered what to make of Pete's denial, whether he was lying or if his memory had been manipulated. Martinez set his tablet down and leaned against the wall. "Jack Miller, what I am about to disclose is classified. The facility you have been assigned to is not what it seems. It is part of a broader project involving entities and phenomena beyond traditional scientific explanation." I tried to appear astonished. "Do you mean the specimens are authentic?" I had suspected they might be some kind of experiment. "The technology they possess is genuine, yet they are not confined here against their will. They participate as collaborators in a research initiative that extends across numerous dimensions and timelines. The security personnel are not guarding people from them. Instead, they are protecting these individuals from others who might misuse their knowledge for dangerous intentions." This explanation of the truth was one I had not predicted. Martinez was disclosing facts that matched what Crow Feather had mentioned, but from an alternate viewpoint. The federal authorities were not shutting down the program. Rather, they were taking control of it. Regarding the previous guards, most were absorbed into secret projects, and their vanishings were fabricated to preserve operational secrecy. For instance, William Crow Feather is now employed at a similar facility in Colorado, while Pedro Rodriguez is engaged in our research division in Nevada. Martinez pulled out his phone and revealed recent photos of Crow Feather and Rodriguez, both appearing healthy and active in laboratories filled with unfamiliar devices. However, there was something unsettling about these pictures. Too flawless, too precisely arranged. The problem, Martinez went on, is that some staff members have gone astray. They have convinced themselves that our research poses a danger to humanity and have started to undermine the program internally. We suspect they have established contact with you. I was confused. Someone slipped a carved wooden figurine into your jacket pocket, and someone else gave you a forbidden communication. Someone provided you with access codes to restricted parts of the facility. Jack Miller's voice stayed steady, yet his stance had shifted to something more intimidating. We are presenting you with a decision, Mr. Miller. Join the program officially, assist us in tracking down the rogue elements, and take part in work that will transform humanity's understanding of reality. Or continue cooperating with those who endanger both operations. The emergency communicator remained silent against my leg. Either the underground team observed radio silence or Pete Collins' group had found a way to jam their signals. I was alone, compelled to make a choice that would shape not only my future, but also the destiny of both competing efforts. What precisely are you asking me to do? Return to your usual tasks, keep up the security patrols, maintain the routine. When the rogue elements reach out again, and they will, report it to us immediately. Help us identify their secret bases, their members, and their plans. Pete Collins handed me a business card with only a phone number printed on it. Call that number any time, day or night. We will deploy a response team in minutes. I slipped the card into my pocket, buying myself some time to consider. And if I refuse, I asked, then you will be reassigned to a different position, somewhere safe, comfortable, but cut off from sensitive information or operations. You will be well paid for your silence, but your security clearance will be permanently revoked. Not killed, I noted. Not killed. The specimens upstairs seemed to have simply vanished, or maybe they never existed, as someone suggested. There was talk about Martinez's real intentions, or possibly it was just a matter of improved public relations. I needed time to reflect, naturally. You would be back for your usual shift tonight. Take this opportunity to watch, listen, and analyze the various accounts people are sharing. Martinez moved toward the exit, reminding me that some decisions cannot be reversed. Certain roads lead to destinations from which there is no turning back. As he accompanied me to the parking lot, I observed the cleanup operation in full progress. Trucks were removing equipment, agents carried boxes filled with files, and technicians took apart surveillance setups. Whatever this place had been before today, it was transforming into something else entirely. The helicopters were no longer there, but their absence felt more threatening than their presence. Like hunters who had completed their chase and retreated to their dens, satisfied with their prey's capture. Driving home through the rugged terrain beyond the eternal landscapes that had witnessed this cycle time and again, I thought of how old powers give way to new ones and established orders fall to make way for what comes next. The convergence was speeding up. The question remained which version of the future would rise from the turmoil. My grandmother had passed on the winter solstice, peacefully during sleep. The funeral gathered relatives from 3 states, people I had not seen in years. A childhood gathering took place to pay tribute to a woman who devoted her life to preserving ancient wisdom in a world eager to forget. During the wake, my cousin Jack Miller pulled me aside. He worked in construction in Denver, erecting upscale condominiums for tech executives commuting to Boulder, but what he shared had nothing to do with real estate. A strange event occurred last month, he said. We were digging a foundation in the foothills and encountered something unexpected. A concrete structure believed to be around 60 years old, with tunnels extending deeper than our tools could measure. He took a sip of coffee, his eyes distant with remembrance. The company immediately halted the project, claiming they had struck a water main, but that was impossible since there were no water mains in that region. I maintained a neutral expression, though my heartbeat quickened. The plot was purchased by a private firm on the very same day, paid for in cash, bypassing inspections and leaving no paper trail. They brought in teams working exclusively at night, employing machinery I had never seen before. Jack lowered his voice and added, "Here's the peculiar part. 3 of our men, all of Lakota descent, received job offers from the new company. Really generous offers. They are now working underground on a secretive project they cannot discuss. Later that evening, alone in my grandmother's house, I discovered her diary hidden behind a loose board in the bedroom closet. The entries spanned 40 years, written in a blend of English and Lakota, chronicling conversations with visitors who came under the cover of night. In the shadow, the name William Crow Feather appeared repeatedly alongside others I recognized from the secret facility. She had been aware of everything: the convergence, the preparation sites, and the enlistment of native people to act as intermediaries between worlds. Her tales about the hidden realms were not mere legends, but intelligence gathered from a network spanning many generations. The last message was dated 2 days before her death. Jack has made his decision. The road ahead is more challenging than the way back, but it leads to places where our people will be essential. The agents who believe they can control what lies ahead are like children tampering with forces beyond their grasp. When the barriers collapse, their technology will become useless, and only the ancient wisdom will endure. I drove toward the Badlands the following morning, following paths that appeared altered under the winter sunlight. The facility was nowhere to be found, not deserted nor destroyed, but physically vanished as if it had never existed. The earth where it once stood was blanketed with prairie grass and snow, untouched by any construction or disruption. Yet the maintenance entrance remained, concealed behind a fold in the terrain that my eyes had learned to detect. The elevator accepted the same access code, carrying me downward to levels buzzing with increased activity. Crow Feather awaited in the round chamber, surrounded by dozens of unfamiliar faces. The walls were adorned with maps, displaying construction sites throughout North America, each one highlighted with scheduled timelines and staffing demands. Jack Miller observed, "Your grandmother's network has been hard at work," as he handed me a tablet showing the details of assignments. 15 new facilities were set to become operational within the next 6 months, and experienced staff would be essential to oversee the transition. I asked about Pete Collins and his team. Jack replied, they were still searching for us, but in the wrong realm. The surface project had always been temporary, intended to identify and recruit select individuals. Now that stage was finished, he added with a grin. Crow Feather explained that once the convergence occurred, the distinction between those authorized and unauthorized would lose all meaning. I accepted the role of facility manager for a site being constructed beneath the Pine Ridge Reservation. The task promised to be difficult, perilous, and entirely outside the boundaries of ordinary reality. However, my grandmother had unknowingly prepared me for this moment, imparting knowledge through stories and traditions that would later become vital survival tools in a transformed world. Outside, snow continued to blanket the Badlands, bringing a hush over the ancient terrain. Yet beneath the frozen earth, work pressed on to build chambers destined to shelter humanity during its next stage of evolution. The convergence was inevitable, whether we were ready or not. At least some of us would face it prepared. The monsters had never been confined. They were the creators. Walls convinced people that reality was something to be controlled by strength and constant watching. Yet when those walls eventually came down, they discovered the true contrast between authority and understanding. Unfortunately, by that moment, any remorse would serve no purpose.